I think the problem is that I'm too prepared today. I have like 4 pages of notes on my phone. Okay, YouTube is up and running. Yay. Okay. So we're going to start with St. Patrick as his holiday recent. I am getting my information from encyclopediabritannica.com. Specifically www.britannica.com biography St. Patrick. So we're going to run with some quick facts. He was alive between 401 and 500 BC, or 880, sorry. Basically the 4th, 5th, 6th century, something like that. He was born in England. Patrick is known to have incorporated pre-existing Irish beliefs and symbols into his teachings about Christianity. So like many other Catholics, he went, "You already believe in this? So let's do that." Christine, I start working from home on Monday. I went out yesterday and got my computer from my desk. They brought it out to my car because I wasn't allowed in the building. I might be contagious. And it is weird. Like all of my work stuff is in my room. It's very weird. But hey, my room's clean because I had to put my work stuff in it. So, Patrick is known to have incorporated pre-existing Irish beliefs and symbols into his teachings about Christianity. He is the first to have used shamrocks to explain the Christian Trinity, which is funny because I guarantee you some Druid priest used shamrocks to explain the maiden mother crone theory and the Father, the Son, and the Sage. So, okay. And he might have brought the the Latin alphabet to Ireland. Legend says that he cast the snakes out in Ireland. That is what he's famous for. That's why he's a saint. Because he drove all the snakes out of Ireland, although scientists hold that snakes never really existed in Ireland. It's not a thing. So Patrick was born in Britain to a Romanized family. At the age of 16, he was torn from the villa of his father, who was Calpurnius, a deacon and minor lord, and carried into slavery into Ireland because the Irish went, wait, the Norse can raid? We're going to raid. They learned a lot from the Norse, the Irish did. So he spent 6 years in slavery. And they talk about it being, hi, Sarah. They talk about it being hard years of slavery. It was 6 years of him working on a farm in Ireland as a herdsman with the other slaves. I'm not saying slavery is good. I'm not saying being locked away from your family is good. I'm saying I don't think the Irish treated their slaves the way the Americans treated their slaves. So he had a dream that his ship was ready. So he fled the farm and found passage back to Britain. There I guess he stowed away. There was some starvation issues, a brief second capture because he ran into a raiding party, and then he was reunited with his family. And then he became a priest because his faith held him through his years of slavery and taught him what he should be doing. So that is how that worked. Let me see here. I gotta go back. 7 facts about St. Patrick's Day. This is from history.com. I really love history.com. I'm finding it really super awesome. And by all means, if you're in chat, please talk to us. Chat with me. Don't just listen. Talk. I will interrupt what I'm saying for you. Number 1, the real St. Patrick was born in Britain. So he got home, reunited with his family, became a Catholic church, became a Catholic. Oh no. Let me know when I'm back, because it was only interrupted briefly, I hope. So he got away from his Irish captors, took passage back to England, became a priest after being reunited with his family, and then went back to Ireland to spread the word. Because his time in Ireland, his 6 years in slavery, made Ireland his home. Other fun facts about St. Patrick's Day. There were no snakes in Ireland. Among the legends associated with St. Patrick is that he stood atop an Irish hillside and banished the snakes from Ireland, prompting all the serpents to slither away into the sea. In fact, research suggests that snakes never occupied the Emerald Isle. There are no signs of snakes in the country's fossil records, and water surrounded Ireland since the last glacial period, and before that the region was covered in ice, and therefore it was too cold for reptiles to exist. What actually makes more sense is that the story is an allegory, and the snakes are a symbol of paganism. And Patrick is credited for driving the pagans out of Ireland, mostly by using their own pagan symbols to explain Christianity, and thereby converting them all. Leprechauns, which are completely based on Celtic fairies, became the spokesperson for St. Patrick's Day. Once we actually started celebrating St. Patrick. So the original name for these Irish beings of folklore are Lo Brechin, meaning small-bodied fellow. These are tiny men and women who could use their magical powers to serve for good or evil. In Celtic fairy tales, leprechauns were cranky souls and were often mending shoes and clothes for other fairies. The shamrock was considered a sacred plant. It's been associated with Ireland for centuries. It's called the Simroy by the Celts, and it was considered a sacred plant that symbolized the arrival of spring. And according to legend, St. Patrick used it as a visual guide while explaining the Holy Trinity. By the 17th century, the shamrock had become a symbol of emerging Irish nationalism. So, here's where we get into the really interesting stuff. St. Patrick's Day. So, the reason we celebrate on the 17th is that is the day that St. Patrick died. St. Patrick had visions of his own death, which is part of what makes him a saint. And most contend that he died as late as 493 AD. However, most accept that he died at 461 at the extremely well-healthy age of 76. If he died in 493 AD, he would have been 100 years old. So, it is generally accepted he was died and buried in Downpatrick. Gosh darn it. Sorry, my Facebook page is going off again. All right, so I am back. About 10 minutes into my talk, and I'm hoping that some of you guys come back. I'm going to continue. We were talking about St. Patrick and how we celebrate St. Patrick's Day and when that came about and how that works, and where the legends of St. Patrick sprung about. So, as I said, St. Patrick was born in England to a rich family, torn from his father's estate by Irish raiders because the Irish want to go, mwahaha, we're actually Viking. And they took slaves. He was sold as a slave to a Celtic priest in Northern Ireland. And he spent 6 years as a shepherd before he escaped and found his way back to Britain. Once home in Britain, he attributed his faith in God to his survival of slavery and became a priest. However, the most famous thing about St. Patrick is that he drove the snakes out of Ireland. There are no snakes in Ireland. It's too cold. Before it was surrounded by water, which is glacial runoff. It was frozen, solid, so no snakes. Snakes want warm weather, no snakes. Most likely they were a symbol of paganism, and St. Patrick was given credit for driving the pagans out of the Emerald Isle and bringing Christianity to all of Ireland. It is Patrick's fault that Irish are Catholic. Leprechauns are based on small Irish fairies. They are red-headed and green-clothed, and their original name was Loberkin, meaning small-bodied fellow. These are the guys who cobble. They mend clothes and fix shoes, and mostly of other fairies, not of people. The pots of gold and all of that are wishful thinking, and that I will explain later. I don't know who's watching on YouTube, but you should say hi. The shamrock was a sacred plant before St. Patrick came along. Prevalent in Ireland. The Celts called it the Simroy, and it was considered a sacred plant that symbolized the arrival of spring and fertility. According to legend, St. Patrick used the plant as a visual guide when explaining the Holy Trinity. And it wasn't until the 17th century, so St. Patrick died in 490, and the 17th century is when it became a national symbol. The shamrock became a national symbol of Irish nationalism. The first St. Patrick's Day. The first St. Patrick's Day parade was held in America. So St. Patrick's Day is an American holiday. I'm sorry. Records show that St. Patrick's Day parade was held on March 7th, 1601 in a Spanish colony in what is now St. Augustine, Florida. The parade and a St. Patrick's Day celebration a year earlier were organized by Spanish colony's Irish vicar Ricardo Artur. More than a century later, homesick Irish soldiers serving in the English military marched into Boston in 1737 and in New York on March 17th. Enthusiasm for St. Patrick's Day parades in New York City, Boston, and other early American cities only grew from there. In 2020, parades throughout the country, including New York, Boston, and several other, were postponed for the first time in decades due to the COVID-19 virus. So, while I'm not really big on the celebration of St. Patrick's Day, to see something that was built into Americans' foundation in 1600s, 1737, be canceled for what's happening in our world today is kind of sad. Like I said in the beginning of the last episode, I'm going to get emotional today. That's just how that's going to work. So the Irish were once scorned in America. Irish Americans today are really proud to showcase their heritage. That's not always been the case. Beginning in 1845, the devastating potato blight caused widespread hunger throughout Ireland, or approximately 1 million people perished. Another 2 million people abandoned their land in the largest single population movement of the 19th century. Most of the exiles, nearly a quarter of the Irish nation, came to the shores of the United States. Not our first refugees, but close. Once they arrived, the Irish refugees were looked down upon as disease-ridden, unskilled, and a drain on welfare benefits. Sound familiar? So let's talk about corned beef and cabbage, because I have friends who swear upon it. Every St. Patrick's Day, we have to have corned beef and cabbage because that's the traditional Irish meal. So the meal that became a St. Patrick's Day staple across the country, corned beef and cabbage, is an American innovation. Ham and cabbage were eaten in Ireland. Corned beef was a cheaper substitute for the impoverished immigrants. Irish Americans living in the slums of Lower Manhattan in the 19th century, early 20th century, would purchase leftover corned beef from ships returning from the tea trade in China. The Irish would boil the beef 3 times, the last time with cabbage to remove some of the brine. So St. Patrick is a saint because he survived slavery and then went back to the country that had him enslaved because of the country's beauty. Ireland's a beautiful place, and it has a rich, beautiful history, and we should all learn it. St. Patrick is known for driving the pagans out of Ireland. I don't celebrate this holiday. I don't celebrate a man who went, let me trick